What's going on? I'm tired and my back hurts, but I realize that that's not the proper way to start a podcast at this point. But I feel like all sorts of pleasantries and normalcies have gone out the window at this point because it's quarantine time still, people. We're at the end of April. I'm giving it another month before if this thing doesn't end. Fucking, we're gonna start seeing riots. I'm telling you right now, it's gonna happen. And honestly, I'm tempted to just go out and join with them because this shit is starting to get to me. I'm not going to lie. I have to be honest. That's what podcasting is for, to actually be honest in the face of all the lies of society that we're telling ourselves in order to not remind ourselves that we're animals. Who are we? We're the Talkin TV podcast. If you guys don't know already, from the very bright and colorful banner that we have, I'm the movie nerd. That's the TV nerd. I don't feel like doing our regular names. I just want to get into this because we're watching a movie today, Chris. Oh, shit, I spoiled it. Oh, well, oops. We're watching a movie today that, quite frankly, I've been trying to get you to watch for years now, and because it's one of my favorite movies ever. To me, at least, it is the defining movie of the last decade. I just realized I'm sort of jumping the gun here. Chris, how have you been during this whole thing?
Well, Dom, I thought you'd never ask, and I appreciate that. I've been good.
I always ask.
I think when people start saying that they think rioting is going to happen soon, if something doesn't let up, that gets me scared, because if you're thinking
it always ends up happening,
then dangerous people are thinking it. So I guess I'm just going to use the very small platform we have to make my first and only political statement and just say calm down and relax. It's going to be okay. There's no need to be even thinking about rioting, let alone going and doing it, because if you watch the news, it's finally starting to turn, so they say, and I'm going to latch on to that and hold on to that. I still have cabin fever, Dom, but I got to say I'm doing a little bit better, and that's something.
Chris, the only thing I have to say is the only things that are more infinite than the universe itself are human stupidity and human boredom. That's all I'm going to leave it at. Albert Einstein rules, dude. Albert Einstein rules.
Yeah, well, Albert Einstein was a pretty smart guy. So,
yeah, he was. I wonder why. And let me tell you something. It wasn't because of theory of relativity. I can tell you that much. That's what everyone thinks it was, but it wasn't actually.
Yeah, well, speaking of pretty smart guys, we watched a movie this week about, I'd like to say, a pretty smart guy, didn't we, Dom?
To add on top of that, not just pretty smart guys, but a smart guy who predicted human behavior and profited billions off of it.
That's true, Dom. Who are we talking about, and what movie are we talking about?
We're talking about the one and only sociopath who unintentionally ended up controlling all of our lives. Because he is a sociopath. You look at the guy, he's 100% a sociopath.
It's apparent.
Mark Zuckerberg, in the movie that defined the last decade and would define the rest of us with our behavior patterns that we're all doing now, The Social Network, dude. That's what we're here to talk about today. Finally.
Yeah. You said at the very top of this thing, and before that thought gets too many miles in between when you said it and now, why is this
too late? It's already happened.
The most defining movie to you of last decade? I mean,
because
you've seen a lot of movies.
Yeah, I did. So, I watched. I don't even want to try and go through my letterbox just to pinpoint how many movies I watched between 2010 and 2019. So absolutely not. No, I'm not even trying with that. Absolutely
it's
not.
In a couple of hundreds, though, right?
It's probably more in the thousands at this point. But no,
okay.
I've seen. If I had to. It's funny because it was between three movies for me for defining the last decade. It was between this, The Wolf of Wall Street, and Her. And the reason why I went with this one is because while The Wolf of Wall Street predicted, kind of showed a mirror up to society in terms of how we admire awful people, that was good. But it wasn't. But it was still we were still kind of familiar with the Scorsese stylisms. Her came very close. But the thing about Her is that it was still very remote. It was still a very personalized character study. The reason why I go with The Social Network is because The Social Network, aside from being a great character study, the thing is the kind of the difference between that and something like Her is only about one person, and so that doesn't necessarily kind of predict for other people's behavior because different animals react to different stimuli in different ways. This movie kind of was almost like a psychological experiment where not only is it predicting where we would go and kind of how we would become invested in this new kind of toy, for lack of a better word, that would ultimately just become a second society within society itself, kind of playing around with those types of ideas. But it also kind of mixed and meshed ideas and showed everything that was wrong with that idea, but also kind of how we were never ever gonna not go in that direction, if that makes any sense. I'm trying to be aloof as possible because I really want to get into it and start deconstructing this thing, because it asks a lot, to say the least, and was right about a lot of things.
Yeah, so I guess my comment to that spiel, which I agree with, is it's crazy to think like this movie was shot in 2010. So let's think it was probably written
before
like
that,
2008.
right?
Yeah, exactly. So I mean, and it's all so now, like where it goes and what he's saying and how he thinks his invention, because he did invent something, he invented and he kind of changed the landscape of social media. Like they spoke about Friendster and MySpace and how those were there. And certainly MySpace was the first big social media titan, but it never achieved the things that Facebook achieved. And it's $1 trillion company now. And it's just so crazy to think like even back then people saw this coming. And so Dom, like, why don't we got to start breaking this movie down?
Before we start breaking the movie down, it's actually funny that you mentioned that. See, you talk about kind of changing the game of social media. I would say, if anything, this is what wrote the rule book on social media, because the whole thing about the internet that we talked about is that, like, before 2010, like you and I talked about this during our commentary for the movie, like for the 2005 to 2009 internet space, like kind of when Google really came into its own, right? And then YouTube became a thing in 2005, and then the Lonely Islands launched and created the idea of a viral video. I don't remember what was their first one, but they like basically created the idea of a viral video. But kind of the rules of the internet were pretty much unwritten at that point, and it was a really free space, and that's why kind of like if we're talking about some of our favorite YouTube critics, we're kind of able to start up around that point and really start to profit off of that, like your Jeremy Johns, your Chris Stuckmans, now we have all these rules for following, like how we break the algorithm and how we can like kind of max it out and peak it in order to get views. But back then, none of those rules existed. And so those guys could just put out freeform content and get like millions upon millions of views because it was just this completely new thing. But before that, like even but during all that time, we didn't even realize that like we had this social network that was going with Facebook. And so by the time people realized even what it was already too late. And then from there, it's like every decision that came post like kind of that 2009, 2010 landscape was what would dictate like how social media would go for like the next 10 years and beyond.
Yeah, dude. I mean, the timeline in this movie, I had no idea like there was a the Facebook, right? Before they dropped the and just went with Facebook because it's cleaner. I had no idea that it was even like a thing, dude, back then. And so like you said, yeah, when I finally realized what Facebook was, it was already a monster. It was already too late. I think that's for everyone. I made Facebook in 2009, and by then there was already like, millions and millions of users. So this thing is just... it's a monster, it's a behemoth, and I think this movie did a really good job capturing the early years of not only Mark Zuckerberg as a person, but like capturing the effect that it was already having on relationships and just cultural structure back then. So Dom, you ready to break it down now?
Absolutely. But if I could just tap into real quick my personal history of Facebook, I just want to say that I made my first email at the same time, 2009. I was in 6th or 7th grade. I was with my brother on my back porch, and we made my first Gmail with 2 names from The Godfather as a joke. And through there, I made my Facebook account, and that's the same Facebook account that I've had for the last 11 years now. Great decision-making involved. Oh, 100%. 100.
Like you,
the name was Giovanni Abondando. Like, I don't know what let us come up with those names, but that was my fake Facebook name back in like middle school, when everyone would make it like, oh, you can't use your real name on Facebook or else strangers will stalk you online, before anybody actually had common sense. It was like, you could just fucking block them. Like, it's really not that difficult.
Sketchy chat rooms, that's not going to happen.
It's like the Dave Chappelle sketch when he was talking about Louis C.K. and it's like, oh, Louis would harass me over the phone. It's like, you can't hang up a phone. Like, it's not that difficult.
Right. And so, I'm glad you went there, Dom, because I also have a memory of when I first made Facebook.
Please tell me you used a fake name. Please tell me you used a fake name.
Okay, so I did do something fake, but it wasn't a fake name. So in 2009, I forget how old I was. You're what, 4 years younger than me?
I'm 4 years younger. So if I was 12 in 2009, that means you would have been like 15, 16.
15, 16. And so, I was like, okay, like, I want to be on Facebook. I had a MySpace. My parents didn't know I had a MySpace at that point in time. So I was already under the radar. And I was like, if I'm expanding, we have to go even more low key. So I took half of my AOL username, half of my Gmail username, made a Yahoo account specifically for Facebook, which is still my account to this day. Summer on vacation with my best friends and in Connecticut. And we were just posting pictures of the Facebook. And it was just like, dude, we shouldn't be on this thing. Like, this is like the adult social media. And
but this is so cool.
And it's like, why is it, before we unpack the film, why is it that, like, I guess it's because Facebook is just like such a powerful.
Well, at that time, I could say it was the risk factor. It was the kind of, you were a little kid and you thought you were doing something that was edgy and cool. It's the exact same reason why this thing caught on and why this movie works so well. Because this movie was just as edgy and cool as the thing that it was about, which was the point. Like Facebook, they even said it in the movie. It was edgy and it was cool and it was new. You know, no college kid in their right mind knew what the fuck Facebook was. They didn't know what it was going to be. They just saw something that would allow them to rate girls' hotness, and that was cool. You know, it still is cool if we're being completely honest. We have fucking Tinder for that now.
Yeah, exactly. So, all right, you want to take the reins on this one?
Absolutely.
Let's talk about the movie.
So the movie itself is based off of a book called The Accidental Billionaires. Don't ask me who wrote it, because at this point, that person owes their allegiance to David Fincher and Aaron Sorkin for finding this book and making it into the movie that it is. It was released in October of 2010, directed by the great David Fincher, the director of Alien 3, The Game, 7, Fight Club, Panic Room, The Curious Case of Benjamin Button, some truly great films. But if I'm being completely honest, this to me is his magnum opus, written by Aaron Sorkin, the creator of one of the greatest television shows to ever grace the silver screen, that being The West Wing. Also wrote Moneyball, Charlie Wilson's War, A Few Good Men. The point being is that this film truly was the unification of two masters at their craft. And it's funny because I watched a video essay from Lessons from the Screenplay, kind of how this film is like the perfect like example for collaboration between, like, you get like a writer that's at like the top of their game and a director that's at like the top of their game. And this isn't like a Tarantino mid-90s situation where Tarantino, in between while he was making Reservoir Dogs and Pulp Fiction, had a few scripts that he wrote, but he was so busy with production that he just sold them off, and those couple scripts ended up becoming True Romance and Natural Born Killers. And like, you could see his stamp on them, but for the most part, it was the stamp of the two directors who ended up getting those two movies, which is Tony Scott and Oliver Stone. That was not at all the case with this movie, because with this movie, you could just tell from the minute that the opening shot, that opening sequence with Mark Zuckerberg portrayed by Jesse Eisenberg, and to me, his best performance ever that he will never ever top, and his girlfriend Erica Albright portrayed by Rooney Mara. You could tell, like, just with the slick pinpoint precision sensibilities of Fincher, with the lighting and the cinematography and everything, with the rapid fire dialogue, play-like dialogue of Aaron Sorkin, and it just completely meshes, like, absolutely perfectly. So Chris, kind of that again, very similar to how this movie delivered its exposition. That was a lot that I just dropped on you. So kind of, what are your whole thoughts on all of that? Like, were you familiar with any of these guys, like Fincher or Sorkin, before you watched this movie, like with any of their work?
Yeah, when you name their films and things they've done, I've seen a few of the specific movies that you named. Moneyball being one. But the thing is, I guess, and I think when I watched these films, I was a little too immature. I wasn't thinking film-minded. I was more like on the music side. I saw these films a long time ago. So A, they're a little hazy, and B, these are for some reason names that never came up too much throughout, like, my trials and tribulations of film school. You're the only one who's really kind of brought them up in conversation. So I would say this was my first, like, official meeting with these two creative people. And I got to say, it's a pretty impressive one.
It definitely feels like that too, because like I said, it's never before do I feel like we've had a collaboration where the writer of the film, his styles and sensibilities have just as much of an effect on the film as the director's does. Like, I'm really trying to think hard. I don't think that's ever been the case before, ever. Like, there's so much of the time where, like, directors just get scripts that have already been written and have been circling through the Hollywood system for months on end, and the director just picks them up and then just makes them, and kind of puts their stamp on them. So by the time the films actually get made, sometimes the writers don't even recognize that it's their own work. It was like, wow, I wrote that thing like fucking so long ago. I didn't even think it was ever going to get made. Like, that's just happens, So I guess I really do have to give credit for that, because that collaboration right there is, to me at least, part of the reason why this movie is so good and why this movie has stood the test of time so well. But, like, I guess if anything else, if we're taking even more timely factors that put into it, like Aaron Sorkin, the fact that he wrote this and kind of had an understanding of the characters in this way, like, I don't know, like do you think that, like, Sorkin understood, like, what exactly it was that he was helping to influence, because Sorkin doesn't exactly strike me as the type of a guy who, like, knew what Facebook was going to be, like, obviously this is 2008, 2009 that he's writing the script. So Facebook is, like, on its way there, but it's still not to, like, gargantuan level that it is now. You know, like he was probably familiar. Like the thing that I enjoy about Sorkin's work is Sorkin is very sneaky with how he writes. You know, like he makes you think that everything is plot focused, but by the end of it, you realize that it's completely character focused. Like he has a very subtle way of kind of sneaking in those kind of little character digs and conflicts without you even realizing that it's there, which to me is brilliant because as we know in screenwriting, conflict is the key to good screenwriting. And the conflict.
Another example of his that you would say does that, sneaking in these little intricacies and whatnot.
Oh, it's all over every single project he's ever done. Like you look at anything that Aaron Sorkin has ever written or directed, in this case, because he made his directorial debut a couple years ago now with Molly's Game, it is all over his writing styles. Like I've watched 3.5 seasons of The West Wing. There's 7 seasons of that show, and it is all over almost every single episode. It's in Moneyball. It's in A Few Good Men. It is all over this movie, you know, like where kind of like
he really just like gets characters and more specifically like character dynamic.
Yes, 100%. Like it's one thing that he gets character dynamic, but it's another thing where, and again, it's where I have to give it to him specifically as a writer, where he's writing these guys. I have to assume that he's writing these guys based solely on the struggles that they had in real life. You know, like obviously, like there's a large part of this film that was manufactured, as is the case with every biopic. But like you could tell that, like with like the seething kind of anger that Eduardo feels towards Mark at the end, and kind of like the what's the word? Like kind of the ignorance that Mark has towards just like other people's feelings, you know, like the whole way that him and with the way that Eisenberg plays Mark in that movie, where he's like, yeah, you can tell from like the opening scene when you see Mark and Eduardo in that college dorm room together, where he's like, I need you. I'm here for you. No, I need your code. You know, like he doesn't actually give a shit about him as a person. He just needs something from him. And that's apparent from minute 1. And he's continues throughout the whole movie.
He certainly is a user. To answer your question, do I think that Sorkin was able to predict where Facebook would go? I mean, I don't think anyone could have, but I guess if I have to answer that question as like an analyst of film or someone who's at least aspiring to like, you know, give his best shot to what we're doing right now, I'm not familiar enough with his work to really speak to that. But the one thing I can speak to is what we were just talking about in the character dynamic, because this movie has zero flash in it. There's like, you know, 6-7 sets tops, I think, but the intensity is never not there. The exchange back and forth between these characters, and kind of like you just said with Jesse Eisenberg portraying Mark Zuckerberg. I mean, and that's why I would be curious to know how much of, because, you know, a lot of these biopics, there's some revisionist history. They change some things to make it a movie and less of like a documentary. But I mean, if Mark Zuckerberg really is like that, well, dude, I mean, Jesse Eisenberg did a great job just being a sharp cutting character, because like you said, like his blatant disregard is one of the most interesting things, but also like one of the most stressful things to watch. Like every situation this man is in, even if it's just being at like a college reggae night or whatever they call it, Caribbean night, like he's just thinking of it as a chess game. Like what a stressful character to watch, right? You know?
And to add insult to injury, and pardon, you know, at the risk of jumping the gun here, but the idea of kind of how he takes the one sense of a breakup and the idea, not even the fact that he's not cool, because like, it's not really that he's not cool. It's mostly just like kind of everybody disregards him, and he is kind of like more of a loner than like the typical nerd, but he kind of utilizes kind of that facade in order to drive him up until the point where, he is a trillionaire, but he really doesn't have no friends because he didn't really have any friends to begin with. You know, like he never, if you think about it, he probably liked the idea of Eduardo being his friend, but he probably never actually regarded Eduardo as like an equal. He probably always saw him as an underling, you know? And that just kind of goes into something that I've been thinking for a while, which is where like, in order to have what it takes to be the best and in order to achieve like that level of prestige and wealth, like, is it possible to have like an actual genuine human connection or no? Because like you're so worried that like at any point somebody could undercut you when you have to be on your A game at all times and you can never show any sign of weakness no matter what, you know, like those are the types of questions that float around my brain when I watch that movie, because the movie is asking those questions, you know, like not just obviously like what does it take to be the best, which I've seen it done in kind of a much more relatable sense, but more so in the sense of like, what does it take to be like number one, you know?
Yeah, I mean, certainly you think about that. If I had to answer that question just as Chris, I think that I think he's a bit ridiculous. I think that you can have trusted confidants, and you will see betrayal. I mean, there's classic examples, even in like, my line of work. Like there's, there's Paul McCartney and, John Lennon, and, they were great until they separated. And then, there's the two brothers in Oasis, they were great until they separated, but then they went on and they found other close confidants. They found other close bandmates, and they went on to create other #1 singles. I think it's an ebb and flow. I think that's Mark's one problem, is that the few people who could have liked him, because he is just, if I met him in real life, he's the kind of guy who I might say a few nasty words to and never speak to again, just because of how downright rude he can be on purpose, and how he thinks he's so clever and so subtle, and just can take those jabs with like just looking at you. That's the kind of guy that I don't want on my team. And I think that there are super nice people who can like get to the top, but I do think that like it happens, dude. Like look at every single big band that breaks up. Look at every big company, like like Apple. They've had their breakups at the start. Look at Microsoft and Bill Gates. Like they've all left their partners, because when you're working in proximity that close with people, it gets mucky. It gets it gets dirty. But at the end of the day, I do think, and this isn't to say about Jesse Eisenberg. This is about Mark Zuckerberg. I thought his performance was great, Eisenberg, but I think that Mark Zuckerberg is a bit ridiculous and a bit too much of like a John Lennon comparing himself to Jesus mentality. I think you can win.
Guys, so you think he kind of always had that God complex, even if he didn't necessarily think it at the time?
Well, I think that was kind of told to you in the first hour when you realized like,
not even the first hour. I would say within that opening scene where he's talking with Erica and like comparing, is like, oh, I could do all this stuff if I wanted to. I just don't feel like it, That
too. And then all the things you didn't see kind of portrayed it. Like you didn't see him like alone go to a party or try and like make efforts to hang out with someone on campus. You didn't even see him like call his parents or anything. Like his parents came up as an excuse, right? They came up as an excuse to sort of like, I forget the brothers' names, the Olympic brothers.
The Winklevoss twins.
Yeah, those guys, like they were just an excuse for him to not answer an email. Like every single person in his life he could use as a tool or manipulation. And I don't think that like he's healthy in his mindset.
Not at all.
Not at all. Did a great job sort of portraying that kind of stiff person.
It just shows you like the minute that he has like the one breakup, like the 1 minute where he actually like has to recognize that he has to take responsibility for something, he doesn't, because again, at that point he's a dumb college kid, and like any of us in any rational situation just goes on the internet and complains about it. But the difference being that at the time, the internet was not just this void that you could just throw your voice into and just drown in a sea of people shouting their opinions into an empty void. At that point, he actually could have some influence, and he did. And in my opinion, he did it in the worst way possible. But hey, it made him trillions of dollars. So morality clause here.
And to like finish off my point of what I'm trying to say, Mark Zuckerberg, an asshole. Jesse Eisenberg, amazing job portraying that asshole. Like, because I feel super strongly about, dude, just so you know, I knew really nothing about the story of Facebook, nothing about the history. I knew, it's a $1 trillion company, Mark Zuckerberg. I knew like the buzzword things about it. And so for this to be like my way to go in and look up some articles on who Zuckerberg actually was as a person, and the more I read leading up to this chat to prepare, I was like, damn, this Eisenberg guy, he really nailed it. He really nailed it. He made me hate Mark Zuckerberg.
I think it's a testament to Eisenberg's acting ability, but also the direction that he was given, that he was able to play this part so well and so compellingly and give it so much depth. Like, arguably, I think I've only seen Eisenberg give this type of a performance one other time with Adventureland in 2009, like the year before. And even then, like, he wasn't given nearly the amount of depth that he was given. Like, the fact that he makes you feel this much empathy for like a sociopathic character, a guy who like manipulates and just uses everybody that he comes into contact with without you even realizing it. Like, even when you have the encounter with Sean Parker in the middle of the movie, you think that Parker's completely gonna because from that point you're seeing it from Saverin's lens, from Andrew Garfield's lens, and you think that Parker's gonna completely overtake this guy and just control everything. And at the last minute, it's revealed, nope, Zuckerberg was still in control the whole time. It's like with that last scene, like, you know what I'm talking about.
Playing chess the entire time.
Yep.
That's exactly what I've been trying to say. And like, it's not that he wasn't around smart people. All of these people are some of the brightest minds of the budding internet age. He was just, he was the best chess player.
Like, so it is definitely, yeah, exactly. That's what I've been saying. It's a situation where like Zuckerberg on his own does not make this happen. He needs Saverin, and he needs the idea from the Winklevoss, which he sold their idea. Let's not play games or anything. Like, yeah, he sat in round after round of legal battle, and yeah, he technically won, and the Winklevoss twins got a nice fat settlement, but he stole the basic idea and just expanded upon it. And without Parker, he never gets the ins, and he never gets the funding that he needs. Like, every single person that was involved in that movie that he screwed over, he did need, you know? It's just...
Yeah, for sure, until he didn't.
Until he didn't, exactly. But yeah,
fun part for me... Oh, I'm sorry.
No, you go ahead.
Okay, cool, thanks. Yeah, the fun part for me was when I rewatched this again yesterday, because this movie, I really enjoyed it. After our live stream, I had to watch it again, and especially since we had a little time before recording this, I was like, I'm taking advantage of watching this again because A, there's a lot of information, and B, it was just really good. And so the fun part for me was, you just said, like, you know, the Winklevosses got screwed over, right? But like, after the film, I rewatched it again with my grandparents, and they had me look up everyone's like net worth, and like, we were just laughing hysterically at the fact that like the Winklevosses getting screwed over was still 1.1 billion each, and Eduardo getting screwed over was still like 29 billion. Like,
no, that's what I mean. They got their compensation. They got their compensation, but I'm not talking from a strict monetary lens. I'm talking from like a status lens. Again, however, like, what were the amounts? Like 1.1.2, however billion versus however many trillions and whatever higher Zuckerberg is worth now. Right. It's a gut punch, not to mention the fact that it's like, then it's not, when you get, it's funny, I've had conversations with this about other family members too, which is where when you're at that level of prestige, it is no longer just a money thing. Like that's the thing, like part of the reason why Mark and Sean cut Eduardo out is because he was trying to make them money. The whole thing about it is they wanted it to be cool. They wanted it to be this cool, like, basic party, you know? Like, when you get to that level of prestige, your only goal is to keep the party going because that's what keeps the money flowing, you know? But they're not still thinking of it as the money flowing, which is why they were still able to profit. They're still thinking of it as, we just got to keep this going because this is cool, and it's more and more people, you know? At that point, it's more like a drug rush than anything else, I would say, you know? Which I feel like is why... Like people complain so much all the time about like why the rich and wealthy never like share their wealth, which is an inherently dumb statement to me. Like, the fact that's like, yeah, if you made that much fucking money, yeah, would you share it with all these people that want it? No, exactly. Use your goddamn common sense. But just beyond, that, it's like when you're at that level, like I'm talking at like, you know, like the Trumps, the Clinton level, you know, that shit. It's like they're not doing their shit for just wealth. Like, their money's set, they're good. They're doing it for like a prestige level in order to kind of maintain the illusion of power. You know, it goes back to this incredible quote that I heard from House of Cards. Again, I hate to keep quoting Kevin Spacey, but there's a reason why this guy was such a great actor for so many years, which is where when he's talking to the Kate Mara character in the end of season 1, he's like, everything in life is about sex except sex. Sex is about power. You know, and it's all, and he's 100% right. Like, it's like power is like, it goes back to Game of Thrones too. Power is nothing but an illusion and a facade. But the minute it's broken, it's gone, which is why the people in power have to maintain it for as long as they possibly can.
And that is what I think. This movie does a lot of things right, but the thing I think this film does exceptionally well is translate that feeling of loss that Eduardo, that the Winklevosses, that everyone else who got screwed over and cheated out Sean Parker of Facebook felt. Because, like I said, at the end of the day, me and my grandparents, we had a good laugh about how, oh, they really got screwed. They walked away with billions. I mean, they really are hurting, you know? Like, that was our joke. But it's more than that, because these people have achieved the level of prestige that we'll never, I mean, hey, look, I hope I know it, but we might not know that. And so the reality is we probably won't know that. But what we can relate to is your pride getting cut. And at that level, it's got to be such a deep cut. How do you recover from that? And so this film, its technicals are sound. Its merits and where I think it's strongest at is just from the way that they were able to, the relatability, take something that, you know, you and I, for the most part, never could understand. And now we're able to dissect it and talk about it and examine it right here. And it's easy, it's tangible, but we don't know that kind of wealth. So how is it that we can understand it? It's because I think that's the most well done part. You know, the relatability. Well,
in that sense, I feel like the relatability comes from just how the characters are written, because at the end of the day, like how these guys all start, again, it's dumb college kids that are just fucking around, screwing around, having a few beers, and, you know, like just checking out girls the same way we would, you know, and kind of like that. I guess like it's just the sense of like they're the ones that like realize it's like, oh, this is how people think, not just college students, people think. Like, everybody is always thinking about their next score, you know, whether it's a girl, whether it's money, it doesn't matter. Everybody is always thinking about that, and just kind of them bringing that honesty to light and being able to profit off of it, you know?
Yeah, and so that makes me kind of want to move into the character of Sean Parker.
Right.
And so he is a character that really resonated with me because, truth be told, I'm not the biggest JT fan. I think he's a bit overrated. I think he's a bit pompous. People are always like, "Oh, he acts in his music videos. He's so good." But I mean, music video acting is
Is that even a thing? Actually, acting in music videos? I thought it was just dancing and lip syncing.
It is, unfortunately.
Okay, that's what I thought.
That's the point I'm trying to make. I'm glad you said that. And I also thought when I first saw him on screen, I was a little upset. It was the first bummer of the movie. Before he spoke, before anything, my initial, they say the human brain in 6 seconds knows if they like something or if they don't like something. And it's going to be really hard to change your mind after that. Well, this film did change my mind, but I was like, it seems a bit easy to cast a famous musician of the day as the dude who ran Napster. But he really won me over.
Yeah.
And I think it's because, like you were saying, and this is why I went there, and they all were addicted to the power, but he, with his physical addiction to drugs and the way that he just couldn't help himself partying with underage people, he was sort of like the relatability I speak of. I really got that through him watching it a second time.
The Sean Parker character, at least how it's portrayed in that movie, is like kind of the epitome of everything that like we would hope for, kind of like this guy that's like not quite old enough to really be taken seriously by that world, but also not quite young enough to really still be like partying with co-ed, like he's right on that verge, So like, I'm assuming the Dakota Johnson character is like a little bit older, but like some of the younger girls that, like some of those girls are probably like 17, 18. He's got to be like pushing 30 at that point, So like, it's just kind of in the level of like, it's creepy, but at the same time, JT1 is so gorgeous, so we don't care. And 2, it's the sense of like, yeah, he's cool. He's that cool older guy at parties that we all thought was cool when we were younger. And then as we get older, we realize, oh wait, he was only doing that because those are the only places that'll still have those types of people. And I think the film does a really good job of straddling that line with him, which is what makes that character so compelling. But you also still understand that A, he's not a likable character at all. B, how he's dragging Mark even further in a direction that he was kind of already dead set on. But if anything, this guy's just making it worse. And also see why Eduardo was simultaneously hated him and was also kind of jealous of him, because you could see that there. And it's also kind of like, if anything, it made their interactions almost even better than Timberlake and Eisenberg's.
Yeah, I agree. And, I'm glad you brought up the fact that, like, you're not really supposed to like him, and that's pretty obvious. But, like, let me pose the question to you. I mean, you can make the case for liking Eduardo and having him be the character you're supposed to like. But at the end of the day, he still comes from money. His parents gave him, $19K on the drop of a dime just to invest in this company. He kind of, like, the whole time just... It seems like things were also handed to him. And
Eduardo's,
so like,
within the context of the story, Eduardo was the most likable. But you start to bring in the real world elements that, yeah, of course you're not going to give a shit, because again, he's a trust fund baby. Of course we're not going to care about him.
Yeah, like, how is it that you can like a movie so much that has zero characters that you want to like? That you all kind of hate. You can kind of hate all of them
because
for their
good writing.
Because
this is what I found is this to me is good writing, and I've talked about this in nauseum on this podcast, which is where you don't just because a character is well written and likable doesn't mean that they're a good character, and likewise on the opposite, just because they're not likable doesn't mean that you can't like empathize and understand where they're coming from. Like obviously, yeah, if you ran into one of these guys in real life, obviously they'd be like this Mac Daddy rich, like Scrooge McDuck level figure that we can like would be like, who the fuck is that guy? Fuck that guy, whatever. But presented within the context of the movie, it's like, yeah, we can get on board with that. And that's just the power of filmmaking too, is filmmaking is supposed to make you empathize with people that you never in a million years would think that you have any connection with. Like that's to me why I love movies first and foremost.
That effect is something I definitely felt. So I can agree with you on that for sure. And like, so like, what is your overall like feeling? Like, is there anything? I know you love this film. You said it's like
my favorite movie of the last decade.
Is there anything about this film that you don't like? Is there anything about this film that you wish could have been done better?
And it's funny that you bring that up, because usually there's always like one or two things with like even like my favorite movies ever that I'm not a fan of. But to me, I'm like, there is a reason why I give this movie. I'm just gonna say it now. I'm gonna spoil it now. I don't care. This is usually like not the time at all where we say this, but I don't care why I gave this movie 5 stars, because to me it's like there is not a single minute in this movie where I am bored. There was not a single minute of this movie where I'm questioning anything. There was not a single minute of this movie where, to me, the craft is not impeccable. Like, every single possible point where this movie works just as a film works, and then it goes the extra step above and beyond. Like, there's a reason why I'm able to watch this film. This is my 4th time watching it and still get something new from it every time, you know, like, and adding on top of that, the real world implications, you know, like, I try to not let that influence my opinion on films as much anymore as I used to. But like, you look at the context of this film and how this had an influence, like, that does take presence and that does matter, you know, because like, without it, exactly, because without it, like the context of this film is almost like inconsequential, you know. So that to me is why like this is like a perfect film.
Yeah, I had to ask because I'm always curious, you know, but that does make sense. Now, I kind of wanted to switch gears to sort of the other side of this film, something that we had said on our watch along. If you guys want to go back and check that out, we did a live watch along with commentary throughout the entirety of the movie.
I thought it was fun.
Nights ago, I had a good time watching it. Yeah,
me too. It was a lot of fun.
Yeah, and we actually got a decent amount of people who watched. So thank you. And one of the things we said on that watch along was, the score almost feels like a character.
Here we
in and
go.
Of itself.
Here we go, baby. The thing I've been waiting for this whole time.
Yep. And I figured we're about that point where we can transition into this. And so I kind of want to let you, because before you even told me anything about the characters, the acting, the producing,
I think I even told you anything about the movie itself, I'm pretty sure.
You told me about the score. So, Dad, why does the score mean so much to you?
Off,
and what is it about it?
If we're just going to your whole thing, I mean, you're a music guy first and foremost, and you've been listening to 9 Inch Nails before I even knew that Trent Reznor was a part of 9 Inch Nails or even knew what the fuck 9 Inch Nails was. You know, that was probably one of those band names back in the day. I was just like, 9 Inch Nails, the fuck is that? Is that an actual band name?
It's for sure.
Stupid. But this film, obviously, it's one thing where the first couple times I watched this movie, I was definitely not paying attention to the score. I just like would hear it and just be like, oh, this is a really good movie score. And then I look back and I knew that they won the Oscar for the score, but I think it was my 3rd time that I watched this movie, which was over New Year's Eve that I watched, New Year's Day actually that I watched it. And I was just listening to the score and just like how like the little like the couple piano notes that they do to begin with, you know, and then like how it gets more intense, like how they're mixing like the more electronic vibes with like kind of some of the synthy vibes. It's like the reason why I go to this as kind of a perfect score is not only capturing the tone of the setting and of what the film's going for perfectly, but also for knowing exactly the type of levels to set within each scene, you know, and that's not something that I can say about a lot of scores. Again, you're the music guy, so you'll be able to speak to this more than I can. But the thing that I've always been impressed with Reznor and Ross, what they're able to do, is because we've seen a lot of scores, and scores have a huge tendency to kind of overpower the scene and kind of tell you how you're emotionally going. I've even seen it in an instance where the score is actually better than the movie itself, you know, like as much as I fucking hate Batman versus Superman, I think that movie is an absolute dog shit piece of shit movie. I do like Junkie XL and Hans Zimmer's score that they did for it. I actually really like Hans Zimmer's score for Man of Steel. I think it works for the tone that movie's going for.
Yeah.
But I also will admit that there are certain points where the scores in that movie, and Hans Zimmer's scores definitely have a tendency to do this, John Williams as well, kind of overpower and kind of tell you how to feel. But once you take the scenes themselves, they're like, oh, those are kind of just dumb scenes. I have never seen that happen with a Reznor and Ross score like once. And this is like the go-to example for that, because like I said this in my review for when I did this movie for my top 10 movies that are turning 10 years old. And I said this during a watch along. This movie is completely the score is understated when it needs to be. It is overpowering when it needs to be. It is synthy when it needs to be. It's reverby when it needs to be, but it never overstays its welcome. And I have to give them so much credit in the world for that.
Yeah. I couldn't agree more. And so to sort of further dissect why I think this works from a musical standpoint is because, so there's something in music, it's basically when two notes clash, but in a way that is harmonious at the same time as they are clashing. And they did that a lot with the piano. So they had the root note, the very underscore drony bass, and the piano on top. Sometimes you might think it hit a wrong note. No, that's just the good contrast. And it wasn't the same key. And that kind of contrast was used a lot to sort of like say what the characters were feeling after a scene. Like he would like be running through the Harvard campus to go back to Kirkland. And so then that's when you would get that type of score. And so I was sort of thinking, oh, okay, so this score is kind of, Mark just had this interaction and now he's sort of postulating on that and thinking about that as he's traveling. And whether or not that is the case, that's how it impacted me. And I thought that that was brilliant because most of the times, like, especially while I'm watching something for the first time, I'm not making that connection, let alone even looking for that kind of thing. And the fact that that just found me, I thought was really brilliant. And another thing I think, aside from just the score, the audio, the achievement in audio, when it was in the nightclub, I remember commenting on this in our live watch as well. The music was very 2003. That was such a 2003 style techno song. It was super outdated, but it was hip for the time. And it was a high quality song for the time as well. That trancy house that doesn't stop, you know, that shit just that they loved and it back then.
Overpowering too, but also the fact that you get an Aaron Sorkin level dialogue exchange scene, which is not at all a quick dialogue exchange scene in the middle of a pulse pounding club, and you can tell every single word that they're saying, which is insane to me.
It was simultaneously very crystal clear, but also processed. Whereas I've been to many concerts, and that's exactly how it sounds and feels when you're talking over a loud band or music behind you to someone that you're at a show with. And I was like, this film is just firing on all cylinders and on all facets of the technicals. And yeah, the score was a character, man, because like I said, it gave me that feeling of him walking through Harvard. It added more to the thought process, to the feeling, to the emotional quality of the film without being written a line, without even being something you can physically see. It was only something you could hear. And that is the first time ever, honestly, aside from, I mean, and this is my bias, I love the A New Hope score. I think that is the one John Williams score that is not stepping on any toes at the scenes. But aside from that, this is the first time in recent years that I was like, wow, this is what a perfect score is. You know?
And you want to know what's even more wild about the score itself is that this score was so good. And especially now hearing it in public, I've rewatched this movie twice now, just this year alone. This score was so good that I started hearing it in like some of their other recent movies that they did their scores for. Like they did the score for mid-90s, and they did the score for Waves, which is one of the few A24 movies that you miss. I caught up on it.
I see that. Damn, I didn't know that.
It's the movie itself is okay. It didn't hold up as well the more I thought about it after I watched it initially, but the score is pretty good. But especially with Watchmen. Like the score that they did for Watchmen, which we've both talked about ad nauseum. Like that is another score that had a huge part. I would say not as big a part because I feel like with that one, it's more so based off the source material, but also where the score had a huge big part. And especially that track, None with a Motherfucking Gun. I can hear like when they pick up on the electric guitar riffs in that score, yeah. I'm hearing, I'm like, holy shit, that's Social Network right there, you know?
Yeah, I mean, just to surmise this, like my feeling on the score, it's like everything you said, it never overstays its welcome. And when it's there, it doesn't take away. In fact, it enhances and enriches the experience. And so I got to ask, like, how did this film do at the Oscars with like the technicals, with sound design, with the score? Like,
so I would actually have to
slept on in the time. Or?
I would have to do a quick Google search, but other than score,
that's fine then. If not, I just was wondering if anything came.
I only know that it won score and adapted screenplay. But to me, and this is again like why I feel like this kind of kicked off an entire decade of just miserable Oscars. Like the Oscars, we've already had our discussion about them. We know they're outdated, they're pointless. But this year, I feel like was the year that kind of kicked off an entire decade's worth of just ridiculousness because like everybody kind of knew. Like overall, 2010 was already a great year just for Oscar picks in general because that's the same year. Like if we're talking like some of my personal favorite Best Picture lineups from the last decade alone, I would have to go 2012. I thought was good. 2017 had some decent choices. But 2010, I think, is still the best because 2010, besides The Social Network, that's the year you get 127 Hours, Black Swan, The Fighter, Inception, True Grit, Winter's Bone, which the fact that that movie got nominated for Best Picture is insane to me because that movie wouldn't even get touched now. And that, keep in mind, that's also the last year that we got an animated movie for Best Picture, not just Best Animated Feature, Best Picture with Toy Story 3. And this movie lost out both picture, director, and actor to The King's Speech, which is another biopic by the infamous Tom Hooper, the director of everyone's favorite movie from 2019, Cats, that was a made-up, fictionalized account of King George the Sixth's, no, it was probably later than that, portrayed by Colin Firth's fake speech impediment, that he apparently had to get a language tutor for. I've never seen the movie, and I'm not going to lie, I still have overall resounding bitterness, the fact that this movie, The Social Network, lost out to that movie, because you look back, Chris, I know you never heard of The Social Network until I told you about this movie, but would you even know about a movie like The King's Speech? And if I told you that movie won Best Picture, like I just want to see like your reaction to like how a movie like that winning Best Picture, like me telling you that now.
Well, I hadn't heard of it until right now, but what I can say is after seeing this movie, it just paints the picture as to what we've said being true about the Oscars and all these award
time
shows
and time again.
type of art. So it's ridiculous. You know, one thing though, Dom, I actually had heard of this film before, and I was off put by it because everyone who spoke to me about it they wouldn't shut up about how.
And it was the sense of where you didn't want to buy into the hype because like you'd probably been burned. It's like, okay, I don't want this thing has already been overhyped for me. You know, I know that happened with a few people with Parasite. Yeah.
You know, touring with people, meeting new people on the road, and just having conversations when you stay at someone's house. Like, what else do you like? Oh, I like movies. I like this. This movie has come up, especially like within our generation. It's very popular and whatnot. But I was just like, these people are all snobs about this film. Like, I just didn't want to touch it. But then here I am 10 years later, 10 years.
Hey man, it gets to everyone eventually. It gets to everyone eventually.
Why do you think it is that like, not only did my grandparents enjoy this film, but just our generation in specific just love
because this is the movie about our generation. Like, yeah, obviously it's about a millennial, but this really is the movie about our generation. You know, like think about it. Like our generation is the first one to really utilize this technology and have it. Like we grew up with this. You know, like this thing came up while we were in middle school, and every generation that's younger than us has not known anything other than that. Like every generation that's younger than us is never going to know a generation where there weren't forget cell phones, where there weren't smartphones, and where there wasn't social media. Like the younger generation than us are never going to even begin to fathom a time when there wasn't social media and when there wasn't this sense of instant gratification, just this infinite amount of information that you could get at the click of a button. They are never going to understand that. So I feel like that, in a sense, is why this film is just appealing on a generational level, because it's literally an origin story of our generation.
We kind of walk the line of knocking on our neighbor's door to see if we can come out of play. Then 8 years later, just texting, "Hey, you free?"
Yeah, pretty much. Because we're still at that point where we can remember that time period, because even though we were little kids, like that's still like very present on our memories, you know?
Yeah, I hear you. I mean, dude, unless you have a topic or anything else you want to say, I mean, I don't want to ruin what is, I think, one of our most on point and precise episodes. Do you have anything
kind of like this movie? Because the only thing that I have left to say is you look at the runtime, because I've seen this with a lot of different things. You know, like they'll say like certain runtimes in order to count for credits in movies and things and shit like that. This movie sits at a perfect 2 hours. A perfect 2 hours, a perfect 120 pages. Like this film is beat for beat a technically perfect screenplay. Like it fits each of the 3 acts, each of the 8 sequences almost to a T. Not to mention the fact that it also does, to me, and again, like this is like really out there, like probably the most wild take that you could get. But this is, to me, the best non-linear story told since Citizen Kane, and I do not say that lightly. Yeah, I said it. I said it. I fucking said it.
If that's not a sound clip,
I don't care.
I don't know what is. I mean, hey, that's good. Dude, I'm glad you feel that way.
Think about it this way. Citizen Kane is the movie that literally wrote the book on nonlinear storytelling. That's why it was such a revolutionary film, because no film before that had ever been told in a nonlinear fashion.
Right. Yeah.
It was kind of the first mixing of like the play style with like kind of the idea of cinema at that point. So, yeah. And this to me is like the perfect continuation of it, only for an entirely new generation, you know?
No, that was really well said. My reaction was, that was just so wise. You know, you hit me in like the heartstrings with it. I was like, damn, that's like a really hot but smart take.
Yeah.
So
story of a generation right there.
Yeah. Do we want to jump into our conclusion?
Yeah. Final thoughts. I'll go first because, like I said, I've seen this movie so many times now that this movie is in my top 20 favorite movies of all time. It's a perfect movie. Like every single sense of this movie, how this works, from the craft to the writing to the set design to the acting to the lighting, like every single possible thing that goes into this film, even like the graphics, the way that they pop up, like the opening credits are like done to a T. Like it's the perfect sense of like every single piece that works about this movie came together and worked in the most perfect of ways. It's ridiculous to me that this movie didn't win the Oscars, but hey, if anything, it's just like Adam Sandler said when he got his Independent Spirit Award for Uncut Gems. Just because you don't win the Oscar, if anything, not winning the Oscar kind of guarantees that your movie will be remembered more, you know? So in that sense, this is a perfect movie. This is probably, I think, the first movie that I've ever given this rating to on here. I said it already. I don't care. I spoiled it. This is a 5-star movie to me.
Yeah, Dom, you know, I couldn't agree more with everything you just said, and for the most part, everything you've said. And I think,
except for being a 5-star movie.
No, I mean, I think it's because like this is just a great film. This film left nothing for me to be desired. In fact, the only thing that was desired was to watch it again, literally the day after I had already seen it for the first time. The score is the characters are so unique and each so interesting in their own way, and everything about this film adds to the film. Nothing takes away from it. This is a perfect 5-star movie. We'll see where it falls. We'll see where it falls on my list of favorites of all time.
No way. But... real quick. Please tell me that like that wasn't like peer pressure, that you actually like after you rewatched this movie, because you had not an entirely different, but you had a slightly different opinion after we watched this the first time. So
yeah, I think you misunderstood. It wasn't a bad opinion. It was okay. There was so much to process. So
it's just a matter of you just needed another rewatch in order to like really process everything and be like, oh no, this is fucking brilliant.
Well, I just like couldn't believe how brilliant it was the first time through.
Okay, it's almost like you needed a reality check. You're like, there's no way this could actually be that good. There's no way anything. Exactly. There's no way. You know,
I was like, it was late. Was I just tired? But that was
definitely a thing of we're kind of been so spoiled by like some of the great movies of the past that like we still like have a hard time believing that like new movies can like be to that level of quality. But they can be. It's becoming more and more rare, but they can be.
I couldn't agree more. I also, you know, a little bit of showmanship. I didn't quite want to give away my full feelings. I wanted to save a little pizzazz for this episode as well.
You got to learn to drop that, dude. I'm telling you, learn to drop that, you're going to see so much more success. Screw showmanship. Just have it be down and dirty.
And so, but you know, man, it was a perfect 5-star film in my mind. I wouldn't change a single thing. I would love to just can't wait to watch this again. I know it's going to be soon. And
it's on Netflix, people. So if you haven't watched it, first off, how have you not watched it? Second off, go watch it.
And then go watch our watch along of it.
Yes. And then go and watch this episode once it's uploaded.
Exactly. And speaking of us uploading things and episodes of this show, you know what I'm getting at.
I know what you're getting at. So guys, we're on the Talkin TV podcast. We have a podcast. I feel like that speaks for itself. We're on Anchor, which is a free distribution service that goes out to Chris. Count it down with me. Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Radio Public, Google Play, Stitcher, Pocket Cast, not SoundCloud, because fuck SoundCloud. We're also on YouTube and all of our different social media platforms, Facebook, Instagram, at Talkin TV or at Talkin TV podcast. No G in there. Chris, where can the good people find you?
Well done, Dom. You're getting so good at that. I gotta say. And the people can find me at Christian Evanko. Right there, you see my name. It's got the little things on it. Just add a TIAN to the end of Chris, and you got it. It's my first and last name. Don't wear it out. Also on my YouTube channel as well. Aside from Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook, I'm going to be posting daily uploads, probably like starting 3 days from when you're seeing this, just doing some songs I really love and sort of explaining why I love these songs and why I chose to perform them for you in the first place on my channel. I also have another podcast called Talkin with Andrew and Chris, which is the sister podcast of this show, where I just kind of BS and talk about music, life, and everything in between, and all the links to everything we do. And what Dom's about to tell you that he does as well is in the description down below of this video. Please go check it out there. We'd really appreciate it. And we appreciate you guys being here. Thank you so much.
Absolutely. Absolutely. You can find my stuff all on my personal social media pages, YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, at my name, Movie Nerd Reviews. And Chris, should I just give him my line?
One more thing. Well, two things. One, whenever we get when we each agree on the score, we usually high five. But since we're not in person, you want to do a webcam 5?
Webcam 5. Boom.
There we go.
Just like that. It's really weird and awkward, but whatever. Everything is, because everything's miserable now, so I don't care. But
and the second thing, this weekend, I'll be going on our good friend Movie Files channel, both back-to-back days. We're going to be starting around 5 p.m. both nights, and we're going to be watching Infinity War and Endgame with a bunch of other awesome content creators who will all probably be on the show in coming weeks. So get a little sneak peek of kind of what we're up to, who we've been hanging out with, and the circles we're starting to run in, and it should be a fun one. Dom, I wish you could be there, man. But like
I wish I could too.
You'll
I
be on
missed
the
out.
next ones. I'm thinking I'm going to be the only guy who's like not just 100% gung ho about like these Marvel films.
Which is why I said it would be better, because we
Yeah.
need some guy who's not sucking Marvel's dick and is like, I actually have some thoughts to say on these movies.
I would like for someone to surprise me, but we'll see what happens.
Yeah,
but,
don't count on
you can
it.
see where that's going to happen at Movie Files channel. Go to Contagion's episode, go down to the description, find us there. It's going to be a blast, and I hope to see you guys there. And with that being said, we are at the very end of this episode, one of my favorite episodes. Thank you guys for watching. And if you know the show, you know what's coming next. But if you don't, buckle your seatbelts, because like The Social Network was a wild ride, Dom's about to take you on a wild ride. Dom, if there's something you want to leave the people with here today.
I'm CEO, bitch. Oh, wait. Watch more fucking movies, people. We out.